Hey guys, Luna here with a new video for the channel. Today we have a really special video, one that I'm really excited about because it's the first time that I'm going to talk about the Beatles on my channel. Fact of the matter is, the Beatles are my favorite artist ever since I started listening to music. Ever since I heard the first album I heard from the Beatles was Rubber Soul. I knew I was in love the first time I listened to one of their albums. And not only the albums or the music itself, also the story. The story of the Beatles, the breakup, how they got together, how the songwriting process was so different from the ones many other bands had at the time. And one of the most interesting and enigmatic things the Beatles history has to offer is the breakup and how the band handled the breakup even after years of it happening. So this video isn't precisely me talking about the Beatles. This is me talking about John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison as individuals. One question that I often ask people who like the Beatles as much as I do is who do they believe has the best solo discography? Of course, I'm not forgetting about Ringo, but the thing is that for educational purposes only, I'm going to exclude Ringo from this video. I love Ringo. I love everything that he did on the Beatles, and I like some of the albums. He released a few good albums, and even one that's really good in 1973. I like Ringo, I love him. I think that he was so important for the Beatles, but I think it's pretty much obvious that his solo discography isn't at the same level from an artistic, creative, or even popularity-wise. It's not the same thing as the other three. That's the only reason why I'm not counting him for this video. I'm not gonna get into detail about every single one of the albums of each artist. I'm basically gonna run through every catalog just over the top, so I can kind of get my idea across of why do I believe that the one I pick has the best discography.
Why are you still crying?
Starting with George, I believe that his discography often is a bit underrated, especially because after All Things Must Pass, he didn't release anything even near the same level of quality or impact in the music scene, really. Every time that George Harrison released an album, it sounded a lot, but it just wasn't as impactful as when Paul or John did. One thing I want to make clear is that George Harrison is not a one-hit wonder. A lot of people think that the only good album he released was All Things Must Pass, or they're trying to compare the individual George Harrison with the Beatle George Harrison, and that's a mistake. He changed a lot his style of songwriting and his style of performance in his individual catalog. Among the best albums that George Harrison released is obviously All Things Must Pass. I'm pretty sure many of you know that album. One of the best solo Beatle albums as well. But then you have Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth, and that's an amazing album as well. You have Cloud 9, you have Brainwash, albums that were released decades after the Beatles happened, proving that George had a lot of potential hidden and wasn't revealed until he was able to craft something on his own. But the thing with George is that nothing he did, nothing he ever did came close to being at the same level of quality that one Beatle album had. Even if you take All Things Must Pass, I think you can agree that album, compared to something like Abbey Road, Rubber Soul, even Sgt. Pepper's, and even albums that weren't as important, let's say Help, don't have the same level of songwriting and performance and a bunch of other things, including production. Not saying that the album is bad. All Things Must Pass is one of the best albums from 1970, and we're talking about an album where everyone was dropping. Led Zeppelin was dropping, John was dropping, Paul was dropping. I believe the Beach Boys were dropping as well. It wasn't because there was a lack of music activity. It's just that his album was one of the best. But still, I don't think it was as good as some people say it is. I believe that album is a bit overrated, but I also believe that many of his other albums like Dark Horse or Somewhere in London as well are a bit underrated just because he never used the same sound he used on All Things Must Pass. And then we go to John, and the fact is that a lot of people, including myself, for some time say that John had the best discography out of the Beatles boys. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, first of all, you have Plastic Ono Band, which is one of the best albums ever made, period. Then you have Imagine, that, you know, it's a much simpler album, is not as raw and emotional as Plastic Ono Band, but it's still an amazing record, one of the best albums from 1971, and we're talking about a year that albums like, for example, Sticky Fingers were released. Then you have Sometime in New York. That album was fucking horrible. Of course, we must take into consideration the fact that I'm not counting the 3 albums he did with Yoko while he was still with the Beatles, by the way. You know, and the same thing with George. That album he released in 1968 is bullshit. Okay, so that's the reason why I didn't mention any of these albums. I'm talking about the highlights of each and every single one of their careers. I'm not talking about the piece of shit. Even though Sometime in New York, you know, I'm mentioning it only because it's important to note how after he did 2 of the best albums music has ever seen, he released this piece of shit. I don't understand. After Imagine, John wasn't even near of achieving something as good as, you know, the 2 previous albums I just talked about, you know. A lot of people say that Mind Games or Walls and Bridges were, you know, great albums or whatever, but to me they weren't. I mean, they're good albums, I'm not gonna say they're bad, and actually Mind Games is an album that I enjoy quite a lot, but they're not the same, you know. There's a difference between something like Imagine, which was at the very least impactful, and just saying, oh, an album is good. It's different. And then you have Double Fantasy and Milk and Honey. I mean, this album's, you know, the songwriting in this album isn't really bad, but the thing is that Yoko is in them, and as much as I don't hate the woman, you have to recognize the fact that her voice is not nice to the ears, man, and the way she performs is almost like she's being pretentious and she's laughing at you. It's almost like Yoko is saying to you constantly, haha, I am his wife, I'm in his record, and you cannot do anything about it. Again, no shots taken at Yoko personally, but as a musician, the woman it's just a huge pain in the ass. So while I do love John's discography, once again, when I say that albums like Walls and Bridges, Mind Games, and Double Fantasies aren't as great, I'm just saying it compared to Plastic Ono Band and Imagine. But you know, standing alone, the albums are good, and actually Mind Games and Walls and Bridges are really good. Here's the thing. I know that a lot of people say that Paul's music was way more commercial and family friendly, and that John was more adventurous or whatever, blah blah blah. But that doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, we want to enjoy the music. You can be as adventurous as you want, you can be innovative, you can try and do something new, but let me tell you something. If I don't enjoy the fucking album, you can take it home. When I don't like an album, or I think that an album is messy or, you know, unorganized, they love to tell me, oh, you didn't understand. This is music for the intelligent people. Go fuck yourself. That's the argument that everyone says every time they want to say that John's discography is better than Paul's. Fuck off, that's not true, you know. Maybe I can jump on the train of saying, okay, John was way more adventurous, and even George was more adventurous. But the thing is that nothing about Paul's discography is generic, at least from the 70s, okay? For example, you have McCartney 1, an amazing album. I love that album. I know it sounds underproduced, but that was the fucking idea. You have Ram in 1971, one of the best indie albums, and one of the first indie albums as well. A lot of people actually say that he was the one that invented the genre with the album Ram. You gotta fucking love the album, man, and some really interesting compositions as well. The people that say that, you know, Paul never did anything original in his solo discography have never heard this fucking album. And also, never heard Wild Life. Maybe that album wasn't as good, and actually sometimes it's fucking unlistenable, but he was trying out some really new and interesting ideas on that album. Then you have Band on the Run, an amazing album, one of my personal favorite albums ever. You have Venus and Mars. Maybe that album wasn't as good as the previous ones, but damn was it a good album. It was, you know, filled with a lot of rock and roll tunes and a lot of ballads as well. Paul's voice in that album just sounds so raw and broken, and it's amazing. But it doesn't really stop there, you know. In albums like Wings at the Speed of Sound, yes, I do know that not all of the tracks are good, but the ones that are so memorable and enjoyable. It's almost worth it to listen to that album only for those tracks. I'm with you if you want to say that London Town wasn't a good album. Then you have Back to the Egg, one of the best Wings albums in my opinion, and one of the best albums if you consider the entirety of Paul's solo discography. It has a lot of good songs, mate, but it doesn't stop there. You have Tug of War in the 80s, 1982, an amazing album, beautiful tribute to John Lennon. You have fucking Flaming Pie, great album, awesome album. You have Chaos and Creation in the Backyard, released in 2005. We're talking about what? 25 years after the Beatles broke up. Actually, no, what the fuck? Maths? 35 years after the Beatles broke up, and this man still has some really amazing ideas, and he showcases it on this album. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's old. And he is still delivering amazing music, beautiful music, and even rock tunes that kind of make you go back to that rock and roll golden era. And I don't know, I just feel like if we're talking about individual discography, definitely Paul has the best solo discography. I believe that it goes like this. In number 4 we have Ringo. He has a few good albums, but that's it. It doesn't go far from there. And number 3 you have George with some amazing albums, but when he didn't do a good job, they were fucking horrible. At number 2 you have John Lennon with one of the most influential careers of all time, not only in the music scene but worldwide as well, with the whole theme of war, theme and peace. And then you have Paul at number 1. Even though Paul never, he wasn't a protest singer in terms of lyrics, he often didn't go further from these love romantic lyrics. From the musical point of view, from the point of view of a music artist, he was the best, the most melodic, the most entertaining, the most consistent one. It doesn't matter which style he was taking on, he has changed a lot, especially in the 80s. He was a bit, kind of gone. But to me, it feels like it didn't really matter which new style he was taking on. It always sounded like Paul McCartney, and that's something that I always love, no matter the artist we're talking about. So yes, definitely Paul has my favorite Beatles solo discography. So yeah, that will be it for today's video, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a like down below so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. Please remember, guys, that this is only my personal opinion. I would love to know what is yours, because I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, saying that John had a much better discography, not only better but more influential in terms of pop culture, the world. So I would love to see you in the comments backing that up, starting a conversation. I'll be more than happy to join that conversation, okay? I'm always open to change my mind. We're talking about my favorite band here, so any excuse I have to go back to those albums, listen to them again, every single one of them, it's a chance that I'll take, okay? So if you think you can change my mind, go ahead and try it out in the comments. With that being said, guys, once again, I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope I can see you guys soon with a new video. But until then, bye.
They, whoever they are, don't stand a chance, because they can't beat love, because all those old bits from religion and that about love being all powerful is true, and that's the bit they can't do. They can't handle it.